And okay, welcome back everyone. If you've joined us in previous weeks, my name is Anne and I'm with the UC Davis Tahoe Environmental Research Center. And tonight we are continuing our Grow Your Own High Elevation Gardening series with our presenter, Katie Townsend-Merino, the director from Slow Food Lake Tahoe, who will be sharing with us about beans and peas. This is a new vegetable for us this year, or two new vegetables. We're really excited to hear what Katie has to share with us. She's had a lot of success growing them up in the area. As a reminder, as we get started, we do have 3 workshops remaining in our series after the one tonight. Next week, next Tuesday, we'll have strawberries. The week after that, we'll be focused on tomatoes. And the week after that, we'll be focused on herbs. And as a reminder, with all of those workshops, through a $10 donation on the Slow Food Lake Tahoe website, you can gain access to starter plants for each of those vegetables or herbs. Yeah. And fruit. Strawberries are fruit. But anyway, so real quick overview about our presentation this evening. We are all in Zoom. We're so familiar with it now at this point. It's so fun. I will be spotlighting Katie throughout the presentation, so hopefully you won't need to do this, but if at any point I get forgetful and forget to spotlight Katie, in the upper right hand corner where it says view, you can change the view to speaker view so that you can have Katie be large on your screen as opposed to gallery view where you might be able to see other participants in the workshop. At the end of the workshop, we will be having a question and answer session with our presenter, Katie. And to access the chat box that we will be using for that question and answer session, at the bottom of your screen, you will see a dialog box that says chat. If you click on that, it'll open up a white text box like this where you can type your messages into, submit them for the question and answer session. I and Graham will be filtering those and compiling them for our question and answer session. So where it says to everyone, make sure that you're sending those to me. It is set so that you can moderate or so that you can only send them to me for now. We had a suggestion at the end of last week's presentation to open up that question and answer period or the end of the presentation to a wider, more forum-based platform, or opening up the chat so that people can see others' tips, because obviously everyone that's coming to join our workshops have gardening expertise that they can contribute in addition to our presenter. So I will be trying to figure out how to do that. I think I can change it mid-presentation, but if not, I will continue to figure that out for future weeks. Whoop. Next, we have, as you may notice, some subtitles at the bottom of your page right now. We do have this new feature in Zoom that we've been using where it does an auto transcription of our presentation. If you want to turn off those subtitles or hide them, on the bottom, same place where you find the chat box, if you click the up arrow where it says live transcript, you can either hide your subtitles or turn them back on. Or if you click view full transcript, it will actually open a box on the right side of your screen so that you can read along as to who is saying what and at what times throughout our presentation a little bit more seamlessly. But without further ado, we're going to turn it over to Katie now so that she can begin her presentation. And I am going to stop my screen share and let Katie take over.
And I'm going to try to start my screen share. So I'm Katie Townsend-Merino, and I'm actually the director of the Slow Food Lake Tahoe Food Bank Garden. I don't direct the whole Slow Food Lake Tahoe, just the gardening part of it. I've been really excited to work with our partners who are all listed below, and we could not be doing these workshops without everybody. But I thought I would tell you a little bit about what Slow Food actually does. So we do have the food bank garden, and as the name says, we donate every bit of our produce to the Sierra Community House Food Distribution Program. Last year we grew 396 pounds. Every year we've increased it, partly from looking to see which varieties do best and are most wanted by those we serve. We also have an education program and meet with groups that are pre-K to college. We didn't last year, and one of the things I'm really excited about is having kids in the garden again. We're all volunteer. So I'm there every Monday from 8 to noon. We have harvest Mondays, and in a few weeks we'll start harvesting, and work Wednesdays from 8 to noon. And you could go to slowfoodlaketahoe.org, and there's a button that will allow you to volunteer, and I'd love to have you there. We also partner with Keep Truckee Green in their compost collection program. We're selling kitchen bins for $10. And you can also bring your scraps to either our garden, even if you don't have to buy our bin to bring your scraps, to our garden, which is open 7/24 in the behind the ball fields off Brockway. And we also have Brooke Asterlin is going to be picking up, allowing you to bring your scraps to the Tuesday farmers market and the Saturday farmers market, which is going to be downtown Truckee, brand new. We're partnering with Little Roots to do that, and that begins on June 5th. Our really exciting project that we're starting this year is to build a community garden for you. For those of you who have wanted garden experience, and we've been asked over and over, like, why don't you rent beds? We're building over 35 beds of various sizes, which are covered to keep the critters out, including elevated beds and wheelchair accessible beds. Again, if you go to your website, you can help us build that garden, or you can also reserve your own bed. We're hoping to have it open in a few weeks, fingers crossed, and given enough bodies down there. We also do with Tahoe Food Hub the community soup nights, and those of you who have been in Truckee for some time may know exactly what that is. It's one of the most fun things that we do, and it's been on the hiatus due to COVID, so we don't expect to do it this fall, but we'll pick it up again. So that's a little about us, and you can go to our website to sign up, to volunteer, to capture your own bed, ask questions, etc. So peas and beans. I actually said that I wanted to do a peas and beans presentation for two reasons. Really for one reason. The first reason and the best reason is I've done really well with them up here. They're very hardy. The peas a little bit more than the beans, and they are quite prolific. Plus, there is nothing like an 8 a.m. pea for breakfast. In fact, when my grandkids were here last summer, they worked with me all week in the garden and let them have peas in the morning for breakfast. So she went home, Kaylin went home and asked her mom to buy some snap peas. So they bought some snap peas at the grocery store, and she called me, she said, they don't taste like yours. And that's partly because peas and beans lose their sugar as soon as you pick them. And the sooner you eat them after you pick them, the better they taste. And in the morning, just as you're picking them and harvesting them, is the best ever. So both peas and beans are actually from the same family. They're both legumes. And the origins of them are, well, they're not totally known. And peas aren't totally known, even though we know it's one of the oldest cultivated crops, in part because of the naming, which we'll talk about a little bit about peas. So we don't know for sure when they were there, but the wild plant is native to the Mediterranean. And ancient remains of seeds have dated back to the Neolithic period. Shell peas are tender peas with the little circles inside that you're probably most used to, but we're not actually going to plant any shell peas this time. Shell peas are ones where you would throw away the pod. Both kinds of peas that we'll be planting, we have 3 varieties of 2 kinds of peas, snow peas and snap peas, and both of those have really delicious tender, delectable pods. And you harvest snow peas while the peas inside are kind of small and flat, and I'll show you some pictures. And snap peas have a plumper pea in them, and those are the ones that my granddaughters find the most delicious. Beans are absolutely the longest known domesticated beans, which have been found, originated in Mesoamerica and have been found many millennia before BCE. And we're going to be growing snap beans. And of the snap beans we grow, some are tall and they'll climb, and they're called pole beans, and they climb. And some are only about 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet tall. I've never had them 2 feet tall, that are bush beans. Both kinds of beans that we're well, there's three varieties of beans we're planting are all eaten fresh. You can plant beans to dry. And if you're doing that, you should just be really aware that some dry beans that are made to dry, if you eat them fresh, can make you sick. So just kind of do some checking of that. And dry beans have both bush and pole habits as well. Although the beans, again, the beans that we're going to be planting and growing this season are all beans to be eaten fresh. So there's some cool kind of facts having to do with plant movement, I think, when we look at peas and beans. And the first one, these facts have to do with the movement of plants and how plants move. And the first one is called heliotropism. And it's the process that describes how a plant specifically tracks the sun across the sky. You can find some really cool videos online if you just Google heliotropism. And you may have seen this also with sunflowers. So sunflowers, their faces actually change throughout the day. And in beans and peas, the leaves open up towards the sun, and throughout the day, they actually face, like the outside of the leaf actually faces the sun. And at the end of the day, the leaves fold up. And when the sun comes back in the morning, they move back over and start over again. And the second movement is called Sigmatropism. And Sigmatropism has to do with how the peas climb and how pole beans climb. And if you look at the little picture right there, you can see the tiny tendrils that are wrapped around the bamboo pole. So Sigmatropism actually has to do with the turning or the bending of the tendril in response to touch. So the tendrils feel around, and wherever they feel something, they turn around on it and wrap around on it. And sometimes your peas, you may have noticed that they start to wrap around each other so that you get multiple strands of peas that are all wound up together. And it's because they felt each other. So I was trying to learn more, honestly, about the exact biological mechanism by which this happens. And I am not... I cannot explain it to you. It has to do with, though, the water cells filled with water, and whether the water and the cells are turgid, and then when they get touched, some of the cells lose water and it turns and bends. So it's on my to-do list to learn more about that. One of the things I love about gardening is how much I'm always learning. And to be honest with you, I'm a retired psychology professor and college administrator. I did have gardens most of my life and grew up gardening, but I never really knew why anything happened. It's like I just knew that if I put them in the dirt and did this stuff, it would work. And in my retirement, I've really enjoyed learning much more about plants. And encourage you to learn as much as you want, but also just plant. There's nothing that you can do that, I mean, that's one wonderful thing about gardening, right? It's just like, it's like magic, and it's like an experiment, and it's pretty low stakes. Things might not go well, but it didn't cost anyone their life. So that's actually a really wonderful thing to me about what I do right now. The other thing that I think is really important about peas and beans is something called nitrogen fixing. So we have been talking a lot about fertilizing and nitrogen, and the fact that too much nitrogen, if it gets into our water sources, can cause overgrowth of algae, but why it's important. And it turns out that one of the things that legumes do is they have a bacteria that has nodules on their roots. If you look at the little picture, there's balls on the roots, and the bacteria are called rhizobia. And the rhizobia live within those nodules. And through the magic of, again, what I don't fully understand, the legume crops actually take carbon dioxide from they take the carbon that we don't want out there, and they fix it into those nodules and turn it into nitrogen. And when the pea plant or the bean plant dies at the end of the season, those nodules actually release the nitrogen into the soil. So they fix the nitrogen into the soil, improving soil health by a lot. So for example, when I talk to you about planting peas and beans, you can use a really low nitrogen fertilizer. And in fact, you shouldn't use a high one because they already make their own. But when we do crop rotation in our garden down in Truckee, we always move things so that something else can use that nitrogen from the year before that was set by the peas and beans. So when your peas and beans are done, let them kind of die back before you pull them out. Let them get all dry and crunchy because you want to give them time to allow the nitrogen to be released into the soil. So what are we going to plant? 3 pea and 3 bean varieties. So you'll get, I think, 3 of each one to plant in your own garden. So I need to try to figure out how to move there so I can see that. So the first variety is a brand new variety. It's a snap pea. And this one was actually suggested by University of Nevada, Reno, their desert farming initiative. It's a 60 days. Again, we have a really short season, which is why we're not planting our peas in the ground. Peas are supposed to, quote, do best if you plant them in the ground because the roots don't like to be disturbed. But I've had wonderful luck doing it with seedlings. These get about 3.5 feet tall. They have extra long pods, so about 4 inches, and they ripen in a really short window. They also tend to be, they have intermediate resistance. So there's a number of different diseases that we will talk about that peas and beans are prone to. And these are resistant to powdery mildew, which I've seen in my garden, and fusarium wilt, which I have not seen in my garden. The second pea, and why isn't it moving? Okay, it's not advancing.
If it's not advancing in the lower left-hand corner, try clicking the arrow to advance it.
Got it. Thank you. These are Sugar Ann snap peas. These ones are a little bit faster growing, 52 days. They have a shorter vine. They're compact and bushy. I love Sugar Anns. They're super sweet. Some people remove the string. You can just pull the string off the pod before cooking, but you don't have to do that at all. I mean, I never have. It is true that if you let these stay on the vine too long, they get tough. So you want to do them when they're just ready and kind of babyish. You'll be able to tell when they get, you'll find one that you didn't pick. You suddenly think, how did I not see you? And it's kind of gnarly and it won't taste quite as delicious. Now I have to move these things around so I can use, there we go. And I grew these ones last season. These are Oregon sugar pod snow peas. These are 62 days to maturity, and these are a true dwarf variety. So again, they're only 24 to 30 inches. And part of the reason for giving shorter ones to you guys is most of us have some sort of covering over our gardens, but it's usually only a few feet high. And when we have really tall climbing pole beans, it might be 6 feet high, and you have to have a different kind of structure to keep it away from the critters. This is a really high yield. That means you'll get a whole lot of them. And these went for many weeks for me. They stopped because of a freeze more than anything else. And they're fairly resistant to a number of different viruses and powdery mildew and fusarium wilt as well. Now these pole beans were my favorite. These are partly my favorite because how gorgeous they are. And they're from Italy. They're an heirloom variety from Italy. And last year, the Slow Food National Organization sent me a packet of these seeds. And I thought, well, I'm just going to try them for grins. And they were a little more fussy, honestly, than my other green beans, but they were gorgeous. And in fact, you can't really tell on this picture, but the leaves themselves have veins that are purple. So they're these gorgeous lavender flowers that turn into these vibrant purple beans. When you snap them, they're green inside. And when you steam them, they turn green and look like regular green beans. So I think it's way more fun to serve them raw because of their gorgeous color. They're 7 to 10 inches long. They get really long. They're probably tender to about 8 inches. If they get too big, they won't be as tender. And the more you pick these, the more you'll get. So like pick them every day. When I say they're fussy, I did notice that it took them longer to really take root and get healthy. And I had more kind of drop some leaves and get crunchy. And even the variety that I have here of that you will be getting from UNR, I could tell they got too cold. But boy, it got over 6 feet high. It was just so tall and so beautiful. And I wanted that experience for you as well. And then we're going to have some bush beans. Bush beans are great. I did a whole bunch of these bush beans, the Maxibel haricot vert ones. And these are only about 16 to 20 inches tall, which means they can fit in your covered bed really well. They get about 18 inches wide, long, slender, medium green pods. Again, 6 to 8 inches. These are a really heavy producer also, so you should get a high yield and pick frequently for an even better yield. And these have a high resistance to the 2 most common bush bean viruses. By the way, the heirloom purple ones that are so beautiful don't have resistance, for what it's worth. And then the new variety to me are the Antigua bush beans. These are the darkest green of any bush bean. And these ones will become mature from seed in 55 days. This is about 18 inches tall. These are developed for commercial use. So they're supposed to be super high yield and super uniform in size. And they have a very high resistance to several bean viruses, which I've, again, not seen the viruses in the last 5 years in the Truckee area at all. So I'm kind of excited to see how these compare in production to some of the other ones. So nutritionally, peas and beans are actually incredibly good for you. Snap peas have and this is a half a cup. So this is a very small, probably you don't think of a serving as a half a cup, but it's considered by the USDA National Nutrient Database as a serving size, a half a cup. So a half a cup of snap peas have all your vitamin C for the whole day, a third of the A, and many other very nutrient dense vegetable. Beans have, again, a half a cup, great fiber, 10% of your fiber, and A and C as well, plus a whole bunch of other nutrients too. But compared to many vegetables, these are among the most nutrient dense. And they have protein. And you hear that all the time, like you can't get protein without meat, but like beans have a ton of protein. Beans and rice together are considered a full protein. So what about planting and growing peas? So this is also the cheat sheet. So if you want to remember what I said, we're going to go plant pretty soon. So you should, in your soil, amend your soil with well-rotted compost. What I actually do in the garden is put compost on top of my soil, dig it in just a little in my raised beds and let it go all winter with hay on top. And then I don't add any other amendment in the spring because it's been sucking in the nutrients from the compost all winter. Make sure your soil is moist and your plant is moist before you plant it. And you're going to dig a trench deep enough to accommodate the depth of your pot. And these are little tiny pots. And the pH of the soil, Heather talked about how most of our soil pHs were 6 to 7.5 in the whole, where we live in the Sierra Nevada, slightly acidic, but just slightly. And peas don't really need much fertilizer at all in a low nitrogen, maybe a 5, 10, 10. And if you're going to use some fertilizer, maybe put it in your soil and mix it in a few days before you plant. And then you might want to fertilize a second time after the first harvest And you can tell by looking at the plant if it needs it. If you fertilize peas and beans too heavily, you're going to get gorgeous leaves that grow all over the place and not as many peas. But because peas don't like their roots disturbed, it's important that, like, usually, like when Allison shows you how to plant, almost always we take the plant out and we kind of ruffle the bottom of the plant and expose the roots. And if it has a tight root ball, we, break apart some of those roots before we plant it. But peas really don't like that. So we're going to take the peas out of the cells as gently as possible. If yours seem like they're really stuck in there, you might want to use scissors to cut them out. And without ruffling up those roots, you're going to put them in the trench that you dig about 3 inches apart. Your rows are 18 inches apart, but within the trench, they're 3 inches apart. And then you cover so the top of the soil is the same as the top of the soil as the seedling, and gently pat. Water deeply once a week, depending on how we have really dry air up here. So sometimes when I'm getting them really established, I might water more than once a week. You don't want to let soil of peas and beans dry out. And peas need supports. We're going to talk more about supports in just a second. Pick frequently, refrigerate immediately. If you leave them out too long, in fact, in the food bank garden, we pick our produce, we wash it, and we refrigerate it in coolers with ice right away before we deliver it to Sierra Community House. These are just some examples of pea and bean supports. You can spend a lot of money. The one on the bottom left, the red, those are bought through gardeners.com, and that right there might cost you $60. You can use, in the very center, you have bamboo poles, and you can see that it's just twine that has gone around the string. For the last 2 or 3 seasons, I've used the method on the right where I take a tomato cage and they crawl up the tomato cage, although I also put twine in between the circles of the tomato cage because they flop over, in my opinion, they flop over too much and don't grab. I have also used the method on the top right of your screen, which is just like fence stakes with twine around there. There are a million different ways. If you Google pea trellises, you will get a gazillion hits and can look at a lot of examples of how people trellis their peas and beans. Now, even though your beans aren't going to get like 6 feet tall, you still do want to offer them support. They will just grow and lay flat on the ground if you don't support them so their tendrils can do the Sigmatropism and grab around them. So that's really important. And for the pole bean, you do want them to be able to climb up to 6 feet. And I have made the bamboo poles that are that long in sort of a teepee for beans that are quite pretty and work quite well. So you do want to support them, and you're going to want to support them. I don't have a support where I'm going to show you today, but you're going to want them supported soon after planting so they can be off the ground. So how about planting and growing beans? Very similar, but beans roots aren't quite as sensitive as pea roots. Again, amend your soil with well-rotted compost, have it be moist. Beans need more fertilizer, so like once a month. Again, a 5-10-10 is really good, and dig some fertilizer in on the top a few days before you plant, and then once a month, give them some fertilizer. For beans, you want to dig holes that are slightly deeper than the depth of your cell. And for bush beans, you want them 6 inches all the way apart. So they don't have to be in rows necessarily. Pole beans like to be in rows, and you put them 4 inches apart. You put them in a row 4 inches apart, and each row can be 18 inches apart. So again, you take the seedling out of the pack, cover so that the top of the soil is just slightly above the soil of the seedling, and pat. You can mulch. You can actually put some straw or some compost all around the beans. They like that. watering deeply once a week, preferably on drip. Peas and beans both do better on drip, and they're less likely to get powdery mildew when their leaves aren't wet. And beans need support. Pole beans, 6 feet tall, bush beans, 24 inches tall. Now, what I do with bush beans is I'll have a 4x8 bed that's just all bush beans. And then because I have covers like this over and I'll show you one when we go outside. When I have covers over the bush beans, I just run string, twine, maybe 7 or 8 rows of twine, and it holds them up. They don't have the tendrils, but they still need some support. Pick frequently for greater yield. When they're tender, refrigerate immediately for long-lasting vegetables. Companion planting, this is for those of you who like to know what you can plant together that complement each other. The most important thing not to plant with peas and beans are alliums. So none of the onions, garlic, leeks, chives, don't put those with the peas or beans. They do you can see the peas like carrots, celery, corn, cucumbers, and sometimes having something like cucumbers planted underneath that trails out is a good use of space in your garden bedding. You can do peppers, tomatoes, turnips, radishes, spinach. In fact, we try to tuck radishes like wherever there's any little speck, we put a radish there. And with beans, catnip, corn, cucumber, radishes, marigolds and nasturtiums are also really good at keeping bugs away. Potatoes can be planted with beans. And some of the don'ts for beans include sunflowers, beets, and peppers. But I don't know why sunflowers, beets, and peppers for sure. But I know that Mr. Google says that's true. So what about the pests and diseases that you might see? The number one pest that I have had with the peas and beans doesn't really happen until August, but it's aphids. And it's not just my peas and beans, but it includes my peas and beans. It's important to inspect under the leaves. And there's at the top picture is an example of some aphids. Aphids can come in different colors. They can look white, they can look yellow, they can look black. They cluster together like that. And if you blow them off with a strong stream of water, they end up on the ground, and mostly they don't crawl back up on the leaf. You can also do the Dr. Bronner soap thing, which works pretty well. To keep them from getting really bad, there's really by the end of the season in our garden, we neem oil, but do that in the morning and the evening. If it's too hot, it will burn the oil itself will start to help burn your plant. But one of the problems with aphids is that they can spread a virus called bean mosaic virus. And the middle picture there is an infected bean plant with mosaic virus. And there's no treatment for that. They start to look all mottled and then they die, and there's nothing you can do. You really just need to pull it out, and pull it out as soon as you know that it has bean mosaic virus so it doesn't spread. The last picture is powdery mildew, and you may be familiar with this one. And watering on leaves or too much moisture or humidity can also promote powdery mildew. It's not fatal. It can leach some of the nutrients out of the peas. And some organic ways to treat that are a tablespoon of baking soda with a 1/2 teaspoon of your Dr. Bronner soap in a gallon of water, and then you spray the mixture really liberally on the plants. One thing I've never tried, but is promoted on some good websites, good gardening websites, is to try milk. 1 part milk to 2 or 3 parts water. And I might do a test. If I get some this summer, I was thinking I might do a test, side-by-side test. I have also, in a really bad cases, used an organic fungicide, because powdery mildew is a fungus, like Safer, which is organic and you're allowed to use it on crops. But if I can do without that, I do. In terms of harvesting, I love little tiny snips. And that's why I love this picture. You can see exactly where you snip that pea or bean. You use these little, or you can use scissors too, but these little tiny snips. If you pull on this pea right here, the whole vine's gonna come down. The vines are pretty tender. So if you want to use your hands, it's best to hold the vine with one hand and kind of snap the stem and pull off. But if you don't offer support to the stem or to the vine, it'll break off and you'll end up pulling off a whole vine, which I have done. So I love using the little snips and going around in the morning and doing that. If peas or beans are past their peak, they aren't as sweet. And if they're bulging, that's how you know they're past their peak. How do you cook them? Mostly, honestly, I like them raw. I've noticed if I pick a batch of beans or peas raw, wash them off and leave them on my kitchen counter, my kids and grandkids just eat them all. I like them steamed. But my favorite way to eat them when I have too many is to make refrigerator pickles. So I've left a link here for you to the Spruce Eats that has some really great way. You can pickle them, so you have to have them canned and do the whole thing that makes them last forever. These will only last for like 3 months in the refrigerator. I like it with garlic in there, some pepper, little bay leaf. Quite delicious to just have some nice crunch when you come out. So that's the information I have for you about peas and beans. And I'm going to let Ann take over for a minute, give you some information about water-wise gardening, as well as start pickups while I head out to my backyard. It'll take me a minute, just had a knee replacement, to show you where I'm going to plant mine. So I'll be back.
Alrighty, as Katie said, I'm going to share a little bit, and those of you that participated in our organic gardening workshop have seen some of this information about watershed friendly gardening. So we covered it in greater detail in that first workshop. So if you missed the Organic Gardening 101 workshop, that is on YouTube, and I can put the link to that in the chat in a moment. But as we're gardening, we definitely like to rely on some extra support from fertilizers or from other ways that or other tools that we can use to amend our beds or help our plants. Because obviously, as we've learned, whether we already knew it or have been learning in these workshops, all of our plants need nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And the cool thing about beans and peas, as Katie was sharing, is that they're actually nitrogen fixers, which most plants can't do. But that's one of my favorite things about beans and peas. And hearing Katie's presentation right now, I am so intimidated, but also really excited at the prospect of gardening these beans and peas, because I do all container gardening. I don't have garden. I have a porch that I've been moving containers around on. So I'm going to have to get pretty crafty and creative in figuring out how to actually trellis these beans and peas. But regarding watershed friendly gardening, we want, as we're gardening throughout the summer, in the spring, and even into the fall, to be aware that our actions affect our watershed. Our watershed is either our entire Lake Tahoe basin, if you're in that basin, but the lower Truckee River drains through Truckee and onto Reno, but anywhere you are in the world, you're in a watershed. So whether you continue to live here and practice watershed friendly environmental ethic, or if you move elsewhere, this is important to be aware of. So just being mindful of our fertilizer concentrations, not using too much, focusing on applying it when our plants really need it and when they need certain nutrients. And then with that, we may not have a lot of precipitation in the forecast this summer since we are in a drought, but those fertilizers are best taken up by moist soils. So making sure our soils are moist beforehand, before applying. And then if there is precipitation in the forecast coming, where that could run off of our garden beds or raised beds, whether we're planting in the ground or even in containers, any of those fertilizers, those nutrients that aren't taken up by the plant prior to that precipitation event can actually run off and end up in our watershed. And the important part about that, or the unfun part about that, is that what those nutrients do for our plants in our gardens can also do for any sort of plants in the watershed. So whether they actually be in the lake or out of the lake, we have the potential or run the potential to grow a lot more algae. And I shared this slide of algae growing, as you can see in the lower right here, in the Truckee River between Tahoe City and Truckee, but also there's tons of different kinds of algae that naturally grow in the lake and that can be stimulated by additional nutrients. Lake Tahoe and the lower Truckee River, by kind of their natural habits, have really low nutrient levels, and they're very deep and very clear. And that's what makes them so special. So when we add any nutrients, that's facilitating growth. But I'm going to check back in and see if Katie is ready for us. I know I'm looking for Francis in the mix. One other thing that I will mention while I am looking to see if they are ready is that Dave Long, one of our presenters who will be sharing next week and the following week on strawberries and tomatoes, is actually the person who coordinates all of our starter plant orders with the Desert Farming Initiative, which is a branch of the University of Nevada, Reno. And he informed me while Katie was presenting that all right, it looks like they're ready. Dave was telling me that the sugar and snap peas actually are were back ordered and we weren't able to get them. So we will have 2 varieties of snap peas and then 1 pole bean and 2 bush beans. Alrighty, I will make you a co-host, Francis. And is that the correct? I saw that you were on here twice, Francis. Did I make the correct device?
Yeah, it's the other one, sorry.
Okay, no worries. I'm just trying to find, is it Frank's iPad? Oh, here we are, I found you. All righty, there you are. You should be a co-host now.
Okay, are we good? Okay, go Katie.
Okay, you guys can see me and hear me? I'm assuming you can. So I'm out here in our chilly spring weather in Truckee, and I'm going to use 2 tools today. Just going to use a hand trowel, and I'm also going to use this as my favorite. It's called a dibble. And the dibble actually has 1-inch marks in it. It's great for planting seeds, and it's great for measuring. Now we're going to start by planting the Oregon snap snow peas. And as I mentioned before, the peas don't love having their roots. So I'm going to take it out as gently as I can. Oh, look, still did some shredding. And there's 2 of the roots. And what we're going to do is dig a trench. So the trench should be about 2.5 inches deep, because that's how tall the cells are. So I'm just going to pull a trench, and then what I'm going to do is use my dibble to kind of see, like, this is that area was too shallow. And I'm going to just place the peas in the trench 3 inches apart. And again, you can estimate, but I can also use my dibble and say, all right, a little bit closer together. This whole tray. I actually have hardware cloth on the screen of my garden bed, and these will use their skill of Sigmatropism to crawl up the screen. So once I get them all in here, I simply move the earth back in to cover them all, kind of patting. And after the question and answer, I'm going to come out here to water them. I'm likely to cover them as well. It's going to be chilly tonight and tomorrow night. So I'm going to pat it down to make firm contact. So that's the peas planted in a row. And the bush beans are 6 inches apart and slightly deeper. So we want a hole this time. So because I have a inverted V-shaped lid, I want these where they have enough space. I don't want to put them too close to the edge because they'll butt up against it. So I'm going to start about here. This hole is about 4 inches deep, which is probably a little too deep. So I'm going to add a little more soil. These roots don't even go down in the whole cell. I'm going to pull off this yellowed leaf and pat it. And you just do that. 6 inches, plant another guy, 6 inches, plant another guy, 6 inches, plant another guy. And you'll have your bush beans. Okay, Anne's going to take over from here. I'm going to head back inside where I can answer your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. So I'm going to share a little bit about plant pickup this weekend as Katie transitions back inside. So like I said at the beginning of our workshop, we have a handful of workshops left. And if you want to rewatch any of our previous workshops, including organic gardening, potatoes, and lettuce, kale, and chard, those are available on Slow Food Lake Tahoe's website. And if you would like to participate in the future workshops, we can have you register still for those at slowfoodlaketahoe.org/events. And those remaining workshops are strawberries on June 1st, tomatoes on June 8th, and then herbs on June 15th. And I'll put a link in the chat where you can actually register for those events, access the previous workshops, or there are still some starter plants available for our beans and peas workshop, and I'll share the link if you're interested in still procuring starter plants for those. If you have any further questions for Katie, you can email her at kmarino@me.com, and I can put that in the chat as well, since we'll switch over to Katie's Q&A session. And then finally, for those starter plant pickups this weekend, they are happening this Saturday. That should say May 29th, not May 26th. Oh, wait, yes, that's if you still want to register. Registration, if you still want starter plants, will be open until tomorrow, May 26th at 5 p.m. But the starter plant pickup is this Saturday from May 29th, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Anne's a little brain dead today. And those 3 pickup locations are in South Lake Tahoe. It's at Verde Mexican Rotisserie in their parking lot. We are using their parking lot, but they don't know anything about actually the schedule of our pickup. They were generous to let us use their space. But if you have questions regarding pickup in South Lake Tahoe, please reach out to the confirmation email that you received from Slow Food. The people at Verde do not have information if you reach out to them. Additionally, in Truckee at the Food Bank Garden, and then in Tahoe City at the Tahoe City Demonstration Garden. I'll put those slides back up at the end of our workshop, but for now we're going to transition to our question and answer session with Katie. So I'm going to share a different screen so that we can get going on that. So Katie, your first question is, what does frost cloth look like, and do sheets do the same trick? I know you didn't necessarily talk about them, but someone was asking.
Sheets actually work fine. I've used sheets as well. Frost cloth is, the fabric isn't as nice as a sheet, and it comes in different thicknesses. And the different thicknesses of frost cloth has to do with how many degrees of heat. They actually sell them at the Villager in fact, last weekend, they sold like hundreds of feet of frost cloth. I highly recommend it. It lasts for years and years and years, and I clip it over the beds, and it gives them some protection. Do you need to harden the plants? They've had some hardening done down in Reno, but it's not the same as here in Truckee. So you might want to give them a few days of Truckee weather before you put them in the ground. I did notice last year after we planted beans, we had a big frost and the peas weren't hurt, but the beans probably took a week's worth of licking. Then they came back. So I would do that, especially if you want to fertilize your, well, let me rethink that. Here's my rethinking. My rethinking of that is you're going to get them Saturday and it's going to really warm up after that. So it might just be fine to plant them. Sorry for the confusion.
Next question is, I was trying to copy and paste. The next question is, does Katie have any varmints that eat the small seedlings?
Oh, yes. Are you kidding? One of the things I've learned as the director of the food bank garden is that the varmints will eat almost everything. And we have covered beds, or we have like cages, like I call it plant jail. The peas and the beans will be eaten by the squirrels, by the ground squirrels, by deer, by everything. So those really do have to be protected. At our garden, even with a chain link fence around it, if a squirrel or a ground squirrel will eat it, we have to have a covered bed for it. There's a few things that they don't eat, rhubarb, garlic, a few things like that. But if they do eat it, it has to be by covered. I make these wooden lids with hardware cloth that disallow the varmints from getting in. Plus the beds have hardware cloth underneath. And if you rent a bed with us, we're doing the same for you.
Awesome. Next question. Let me see if my copy and paste works. Yes. Is it possible to plant peas or beans in containers?
You can. You should use at least a 5-gallon pot though, not a 1-gallon pot. And the peas, you might put in a 5-gallon pot, maybe 6 peas. That's a really good place to use a tomato cage for it to grow up. I've never grown beans in containers. I understand you can grow bush beans in containers, but I don't 100% know for sure about pole beans.
All right. And remember, if you have any questions, to put those in the chat. I think I'm not missing any.
I have a question to me said, when you're picking, where do you pick? Next to the bean or on the stalk? And so the bean in the pod has a little tiny stem that then attaches to the vine. And so what you want to do is pick it from the stem. And you can either break that stem in half or you just clip it with scissors right on the stem.
All right. Where can we get the cheat sheet to print? And how do I access previous workshops on YouTube? I can share about how to access the previous workshops on YouTube. I will put the link to YouTube in the chat here now. I'm just trying to filter through the questions as well as share that information with you all. But the cheat sheet we have, I believe this year we were keeping it in the presentation. If anyone needs to go back and refer to it, each of the presenters were highlighting it as the cheat sheet. Katie, do you know if that was also being shared in the follow-up emails as something that could be printed?
I can put mine into a Word document. If that was,
Awesome.
If that's easier for people and have it posted separately, I can do that. Would that be useful?
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Okay, I'll make mine into a Word document and send it to you. I also got a question saying, if I planted seeds right now, would the plants mature okay for a harvest this year? I could tell you, I don't think that's true in Truckee, because I usually plant my seeds inside in March. I usually plant them around now or the 1st of June. And I have a late harvest, and then the frost kills them before they're done. And I'm worried for you that if you planted them right now, you actually would be like 2 months, 6 weeks, 2 months behind. And we have such a short season. You could try it, but I wouldn't hold my breath.
The next question is, you had mentioned companion planting peas with potatoes. If I planted potatoes in a 5-gallon bucket, could I put pole beans in with stakes?
I don't know. I don't know, which is the truth. I don't know, but I am a fan of experimentation, and I just try things. And I read about it, or I get an idea and you try it and you say, did that work or not? And sometimes I do things like side by side to do a comparison. Other times I just try it once or twice. So go ahead and try it, and you could tell us if it worked next year. It's a good question. It's a good idea.
All right, next question. I imagine the beans need full sun. Do they do better along a south-facing wall?
Beans do like full sun. I will say that where I have planted the beans and peas in our garden, it is probably more like 6 hours of sun, 7 hours of sun, and that's enough. I've never planted them against a wall. A south-facing wall is nice and warm, so it certainly isn't going to hurt.
And then a similar question, are peas better with AM sun or PM dappled shade, or is full sun okay for them?
Full sun is okay for them. I get PM dappled shade where I plant mine, both at my house and in the, maybe even at home. I get more dappled sun in the morning, and I don't get as much sun as I do in the garden down by the river. But dappled shade would be fine. Again, you want 6 hours of sunlight, I think, to really be safe.
Okay, and then there was a similar question following up that last summer someone grew some peas and found that they really struggled in the midday hot sun, and asked if you have ever tried to intentionally shade them with another plant.
I've never had to do that, but you could intentionally shade them. You can also put shade cloth. So remember how I said frost cloth comes in different thicknesses? If you get thin frost cloth, the thin layer can sometimes act as good shade if you need to shade plants. And we do get some pretty direct sun up here. And if yours are struggling from that, 1, try more water, and 2, try some sort of shade cloth. You can also just get shade cloth, but the frost cloth's less expensive, the really thin stuff.
Awesome. And then someone else shared that they planted last year on Father's Day weekend, and they had peas through early September. So I'm not sure if that was from seed.
I don't know if that was starts or seed.
Yeah.
I would not have been able to get if it were seeds. Starts for sure.
Well, that looks like all the questions that have come through. I'll give it 1 more minute in case anyone had any last minute questions. Or Katie, is there anything else that comes to mind that you would like to share?
I just wish you all the gardening success. I just, hope it provides you as much joy as it does me. There's as a psychologist, I know there are, someday I'll do a presentation on this. There are great reasons to believe that gardening and dirt, the soil that we get our hands in, are actually promoting mental health. So if you're anxious, come down and volunteer and get your hands in that dirt, get the good probiotics going. Good for your brain. Yes, indeed.
Someone else had a question come through. Where do you find shade or frost cloth?
You can do it up here at Truckee, the Villager, online, if that's your jam, Home Depot, Lowe's. One of my favorite garden stores actually is in Reno, Rail City. They have a wide variety of really good, high quality gardening materials.
Awesome. All right, I am going to put in the chat the links that I promised to everyone. And then someone shared in the chat, in South Lake Tahoe, DIY has it inside on the right wall on the bottom shelf. Very specific. Okay, this first link that I'm putting in the chat is if you are still interested in registering for starter plants. And then I'll share the link for YouTube recordings to rewatch. And this link on Slow Food's website actually also includes last year's workshop series. So beans and peas are new for this year, but lettuce and kale were covered last year. Chard was a new addition this year at the request of interest from participants last year. Workshops. And then I think your email was the third thing that I promised. Was there anything else that I promised anyone? Do you know of, Katie? At me.com.
So I'll send you a cheat sheet today or tomorrow, so that can be posted with the video.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think I shared what I intended to share with everyone. If anyone is interested in rewatching any workshops, those are always fun. I don't like rewatching them because I don't like watching myself on camera. But I think that wraps it up for us. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll put my email in the chat as well. I know there were a few people asking questions that I'm going to follow up with regarding plant pickups. But other than that, thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great evening.